I had decided to go to Egypt. My curiosity was too great. My yearning to get an answer was too much of a pull. The need for the pain and pleasure that came with being around a prophet consumed me. It was not hard to find it. I just had to follow the jinn that flocked there. I wondered if I would run into Iblis there, if I would have to fight him. The jinn were like flies flocking to a pile of shit. Carrion's birds circling above a fresh kill. They have abandoned the mortals they had tortured and were running to Egypt. They would stare at me as I passed them. They would whisper my name and curse me. They hated me now. Gone was the kinship and curiosity they had about me. Now it was hate. They were jealous. They did not understand why I was not like them, why I was still loved by God. Most of all, why I did not have to feed on the desires and sins of men to live. I was an anomaly to them. They could not explain me, yet they wanted to be me. Since they could do neither, they just hated me. The things they would say to me made me shiver. Many tried to whisper to my heart and cursed me angrily when they could not. I was Jinn, but at the same time, I was something else. Travelling was not the same for us as it was for mortals. We could cover great distances in very little time. We had no need to rest, and we did not tire. The other jinn were driven by hunger, I by curiosity. It was not long before I stood looking down on Kemet, or what is known today as Egypt. This was by far the most beautiful city I have yet seen. Its streets and buildings were lavish and paved in gold. The people here were of every shade that a mortal could come in. The men, for the most part, had bald brown heads and long beards laden with gold rings. Even the poor and peasants among them had gold. Gold was valuable in all other parts of the world, but here it was no more different than the sand they walked on. They loved it for its colour and shine, not for its worth. They had huge constructs called pyramids. Most were tombs of their dead kings and priests. Huge images of half-men, half-creature statues were everywhere. They seemed happy and busy. I walked among them in my dusty and worn clothes, and no one looked at me strangely. My pale skin did not turn any eyes or garner me strange looks. I saw many people here with skin almost as pale as mine. Their eyes a deep blue or green, hair ashen or blonde. I looked like I could be from the area they hailed from. I liked this city. It did not feel like Sodom and Gomorrah. There was no rampant sexuality here. This golden city was fascinating. Priests would stare at me in awe, for they could tell I was not mortal, but they did nothing else. It seemed like they are used to seeing immortal beings here. Magicians and sorcerers stopped to talk to me. They were fascinated by me. Some tried to charm me and control me. They would bow to me in amazement when they could not. Word quickly got around that a god was walking among them, and unfortunately I was the one they called a god. I explored the city and came to a place that hurt my heart. There were people whose skin was as black as Adam's. They were called Hebrews. They lived in the poorest parts of the city. They dwelled in the slums and were slaves. They were spat on and beat. They were treated like a blight on the city. "Where is your Yahweh, slave?" I heard a tall, brown-skinned Egyptian shout, and he kicked a woman in her face. Blood trickled from her ebony face. She was beautiful. She had the look of Adam and Hawa. These people were blessed. She looked at me like she recognized me, like she knew me.
"Ra rules here,"
the man said again and was about to strike her. I grabbed his arms and broke it with very little effort. He howled in pain and looked at me with fear in his eyes.
"Go now!"
I shouted at him. I knew he would be trouble. He would alert the guards. I could not stand by and allow that man to beat this woman. The Egyptian struggled to his feet and ran off. I knelt to help the woman to her feet. She smiled a beautiful smile and wiped the blood from her face. She picked up an old, worn and tattered scarf from the muddy and shit-covered ground and shook it off, then wrapped it around her head. There was something different about her. More of her people came out. They all seemed different. I could see the fire in them, the very same fire that I see in the eyes of the prophets, but it was greatly diminished. These were holy people, people beloved and chosen by God. I wondered if that is why they suffered so. They had God's love, and thus they suffered in this world. I pitied them. The woman saw the pity in my eyes, and that angered her.
"We are not helpless, and don't need your pity. Yahweh will send someone to lead us to a land promised for us,"
the woman spat. She glared at me a moment longer, then turned to her people that were awaiting her. "I pity you because Allah loves you," I said to her back. She stopped dead in her tracks. I seemed to have hit a nerve in her. Some men of her people ran up to her.
"Safura, are you okay?"
a burly, ebony-skinned man asked. I studied him. He was huge and could have easily saved her from that Egyptian that was beating her. But he did not. He just stood and watched like the rest of his people. My first thought was they were cowards. But the dim fire in their eyes spoke otherwise. There was a reason why they did not fight. A reason why they took the abuse and suffering. I wanted to find out why.
"What did you say?"
Safura asked. She turned her beautiful dark eyes to me. "Yahweh is what you call God, right?" I asked her. I knew mortals had many different names for the Creator, but it was all the same. There was only one Creator. All roads begin and end with Him.
"The gods will come back with others because of him,"
the burly ebony Hebrew said. He pointed at me.
"We cannot linger,"
he said nervously. His dark eyes darted around as if he thought an army of Egyptians would burst from the alleyway. Safura stared at me a long moment, then motioned me to follow her. Her people looked at her in protest, but said nothing. These were a passive people. Passive in the non-violent sense. Being among mortals taught me that there are many forms of aggression. The Hebrews were a very aggressive people. While they lacked in violence, they found other ways to compensate for that. I often wonder what happened to these people. I don't want to stray too far from the tale, but the people who call themselves Jews today are not the same chosen people of God that I knew and saw. The ones of modern times are frauds, a weak imitation of the ebony-skinned Hebrews of old. I followed the beautiful Safura through the rundown and dirty ghetto they were forced to live in. We wound our way through a maze of slums. These people with the fire of heaven in their eyes lived in dirt and shit. They reminded me of Ayub, but not as patient and thankful for their misfortune. The Hebrews were angry and arrogant. They had an air of being better than everyone, even though they knew they existed at the very bottom of society. They were slaves. They acted like they knew a powerful secret that no one else was privy to. I found myself not liking these Hebrews for some reason. I could not see why God would love them and choose them. Of all the different people I have run into, why these people? As we walked, Safura fell back and stared at me.
"What are you?"
she asked. I met her gaze and saw the fire burned in her a bit brighter than the others. She was meant for something greater than the others. She was strong and fierce. "I am a Jinn," I replied. Safura's pretty dirty face looked confused. She had never heard of a Jinn before. I was struggling to find a word to explain it to her.
"Are you a malach?"
she asked. Now she had me at a loss. I have never spoken to a Hebrew before, so I did not know their language. She smiled at the confusion on my face.
"An angel, or powerful spirit,"
Safura explained. Her accent was thick. It was strange that I never noticed it before. Maybe now that I knew she spoke a different language, I noticed it. I pondered on her words. I was not an angel. The only angel I ever interacted with was Malaik. I did not like him very much. A spirit was closer to what I was. I nodded. This seemed to please her. A beaming smile pierced the dirt, shit, and blood that caked her face.
"Malach,"
Safura said to the others. She pointed at me. The others nodded they were not afraid. This seemed to make sense to them, or maybe it was the only way they could explain me. We finally stopped at an old hut that barely seemed to stand. It had no door, just a tattered and stained sheet. There was a fire that burned within. I can see its glow through the sheet. When the wind blew, the sheet would move and I could see an old, stooped, ebony-skinned man sitting by the fire. He warmed his old dirty hands. He was just as filthy as all the others. Safura stood by the dirty sheet.
"Zaken?"
she shouted. I was not sure if that was the old man's name or his title, but he looked at the sheet and waved. Safura looked at me, the fire dancing dangerously in her dark eyes.
"This is our sacred elder. Give him the proper respect."
Her voice was low and threatening. I could not help but laugh. Their elder was no more than a newborn to me. Safura glared at me angrily. She thought I was laughing out of disrespect. "Who have you brought to me, Safura?" the old man asked. Safura moved the old, stained sheet aside so I could walk in. I was vastly taller than all of these people. I ducked and quickly sat in the squalor that was the floor. The fire was stronger in the old man's eyes than any of the other Hebrews. The old man studied me for a moment and smiled. "Malach," the elder said excitedly. Seeing the old man smile had an effect on Safura and the others. I wondered exactly who this man was to them, or if they truly just revered their elders. "Now I understand why he laughed, for he is my elder countless times over," the elder said. I liked this elder. His personality was infectious. I found myself smiling with him. The happiness in his old eyes was genuine. He was a slave and lived in something worse than a pig pen, and yet he was the happiest man I have met in Egypt this far. Safura whispered something in his ear. The old man looked at me and nodded.
"Your good intentions have brought some pain to us, Malach," the old man said.
I was confused by his words. What have I done to hurt them?
"Your intervention in Safura's abuse will bring the guard down here, and they will abuse many of us," the old man said.
It was almost as if he read my thoughts. I sighed as I understood. They kept the peace, knowing that defiance would cause more pain. It was better for one of them to suffer for the group than for all of them to suffer because of one. So in essence, they were all martyrs for each other. They seemed eager to fall on the sword to save their group. As annoying and arrogant as they were, I admired this about them. They cared for their own, and nothing else. They could care less if the rest of the world was burning. As long as their own was safe, they would watch it burn.
"I am sorry," I said.
I truly was. I did not want to bring pain or trouble to anyone. It was just hard for me to sit by and watch another get abused. I found that I hated oppression. I found it cruel to degrade and harm those that were weaker than you just because you could. It was hard for me to sit by and allow it to happen, knowing I am stronger than any mortal on this earth. The old man stared at me a moment longer. The dim fire in his eyes burned into me. He waved his hand, dismissing it. They would endure it and move on. For they knew something the rest did not, it seemed.
"We won't be slaves in the people of shit much longer, Malach," the old man said.
The faces of the others lit up as the old man started to talk about this foretold freedom of theirs. I was confused yet again. Freedom was the dream of every slave, but most would discover after being a slave their entire life they would not know what to do with the freedom they dreamt of.
"Our Savior has come, Malach. He will lead us to the land promised to us," the old man said.
Were they talking about a prophet? I knew there had to be one here, for the Jinn were flocking here. I could see them everywhere except among these people. The Jinn seemed to avoid them. I knew the old man had more to say, so I did not ask anything. I just stared into the fire and listened.
"Safura has met him. She is his wife. He was once a prince here, an orphaned Hebrew who was taken in by the Pharaoh's wife and raised as his son. It is ironic how Yahweh works. The armies of Pharaoh slaughtered his family because they were Hebrew, just to raise a Hebrew that will be their destruction," the old man said.
I looked at Safura. She seemed bashful for the first time. She lowered her gaze and smiled. This explained why she burned a bit brighter than the others. She was chosen to be a wife of a prophet.
"Who is this savior?" I asked.
Before they could answer, a painful scream erupted not far from the old man's hut. Safura looked at me.
"They have come for revenge," she said angrily.
The rage in her eyes was powerful. It burned bright. I knew she wanted to fight, but that was not their way. I felt guilty. because this retribution was my doing. I stood and walked out of the hut. I saw a Hebrew man lying in the shit and mud with a sword through his gut. I was enraged. The Egyptian guards pointed at me. I ran towards them. I was going to rip their heads from the bodies.
Malach!
Sapphira shouted. She had such authority and power in her voice that I paused and turned to her. She shook her head. I understood. I could kill these guards, but more would come and kill more of the Hebrews. I sighed and hung my head. The Egyptian guards did not approach me. They were afraid. They knew what Malach meant. I walked over to the dying Hebrew and placed my hand on his gut. Blood poured out from between my fingers. I started to weep. This man was dying because of me. Allah, I have not spoken to you in 1,000 years. Please don't let this son of Adam suffer because of my foolishness. I prayed. I felt different suddenly. The fire that was once my essence returned to my hands. I felt the warmth of being a Jinn of smokeless fire again. My heart swelled. Though it was just my hands, it felt good to not feel the cold darkness of this world. The dying Hebrew gasped, and his wound closed. The fire of my hands seeping into him and healing him. The Hebrew that was dying looked at me through the bright fire.
Yahweh,
he said. I could not tell if he was asking if I was Yahweh or if he was calling out to his Lord. Either way, the look of pain on his face vanished and was replaced by one of pain. The Hebrew slept in my arms. The fire that once was my essence was gone, and I was back in the cold, dark world of mortals. I sobbed into my pale, fireless hands. To be loved by God is to suffer. The guards were stunned for a long moment, then levelled their spears at me. I raised my hands in surrender. I did not want any harm to come to these people, these chosen of God. They reluctantly approached me and roughly grabbed me. I looked back at Sapphira. She was cradling the head of the Hebrew man I healed. She smiled warmly at me. Sapphira loved her people and loved me for helping them. This Musa must be a great and powerful man to make a woman as strong and fierce as Sapphira bashful and blush. I was looking forward to finding this prophet. The guards led me through the slums of the Hebrews. These poor and downtrodden people held a strength in their eyes that amazed me. The Egyptians were rough with me, but not nearly as rough as they normally were. They were afraid. They hurried me through the streets. The everyday Egyptians looked at me and whispered,
Malach,
or,
he's a god.
I found it strange that these people thought an all-powerful God would allow himself to be roughly escorted to see a mortal king. But I never could understand the mind of mortals. The Pharaoh wanted to see me. He had heard that a god had come to his city. He was anxious to meet me. The guards did not lead me to a cell. They brought me to a lush garden. Fruits of every kind seemed to grow here. Fresh water fell from a fountain carved in the image of one of their gods. A tall, well-built man sat in a cushioned chair lined with gold. His skin was light brown. His beard, long and black, was braiding and fell to his belly button. It had several gold rings through it. It was well oiled, and he seemed to not care about the grey that was threatening to take over it. His head was bald, and his eyes were lined with charcoal. He looked pretty. It seemed most men in the city liked to mix their masculine frame with a more feminine look. His dark eyes locked on mine, and instantly I knew he was the pharaoh. His eyes held a power and authority that only a ruler could have. I studied the garden. It was beautiful. Oddly enough, several hundred years later, Malaik would be cursed here. The pharaoh motioned for me to sit across from him. The chair was equally as cushioned. As I got closer, he saw the shit-stained and filthy clothes I wore. He made a look of distaste. "Are you the god of shit?" the pharaoh asked. He had no fear of me. He waved his hand, and what seemed like an army of servants materialized from the shadows. They took my clothes from me, and I stood naked in front of them all. The pharaoh studied my body from head to toe. "Does that work?" the pharaoh asked. He pointed at my genitals. I honestly had no idea. I assumed they did not, for I had never had to urinate and felt no desire or lust. "I don't know," I responded. A guard approached me and rammed the butt of his spear in my gut. The spear heft thudded loudly, like it hit stone. I did not budge or feel a thing. The guard stunk of fear of me, but he feared the pharaoh more and went to strike me again, but the pharaoh held up his hand. The guard bowed and backed away. "When answering me, it's wise to address me as Lord," the pharaoh said. His voice was calm and full of curiosity. I shook my head. I would not address this mortal as Lord, for I had only one Lord, and he created all things, even this pretender before me. "You are not my Lord," I responded. I heard the sound of many swords leaving their sheaths. The guards rapidly approached me. The pharaoh raised his hand. The guards sheathed their swords and went back into position. "You don't fear death?" the pharaoh asked. I frowned. "I am immortal. Nothing can kill me except the one who created me," I responded. The pharaoh waved his hand again, and naked women came from the shadows with bowls of steaming waters and rags. They washed me in front of the pharaoh. They scrubbed every part of my body. The pharaoh watched me intently. He pointed at my genitals. The women grabbed it and stroked it. Several of them put it in their mouths. Yet nothing. I had no reaction and felt nothing. The pharaoh waved his hand again, and the women stopped. They hung their head and hurried away like they had failed and were fearful of the consequences. The pharaoh looked intrigued. He motioned for a boy to attend to me. The boy grabbed my genitals and stroked it. Again, nothing happened. I remembered the cities of sin and desire. This perversion was rampant there. I was disgusted and would no longer be the amusement of this mortal. I smacked the boy hard across his cheek. He slid across the floor. Again the guards advanced, and again the pharaoh halted them. "Allow me to cover myself?" I asked. The pharaoh smiled and nodded. Several servants came out of the shadows and dressed me in a fine black robe. After I had dressed, the pharaoh motioned for me to sit. "Burn his rags," the pharaoh commanded. He looked at the filthy rags on the floor with disgust. A servant hurried to get them out of his sight. "What are you?" the pharaoh asked. Mortals always ask this question. They all seemed concerned with power and hierarchy. I am a creation of Allah, once a Jinn of smokeless fire. Now I am this. I was created before Adam, I replied. The Pharaoh listened intently. He seemed like a man that did not miss anything, like he repeated each word I spoke in his head over and over and went over every possible meaning that he could glean from it. I have heard of this Allah, but never of Adam. The Nubians deep in the forest far away from here call their god by the same name. The Pharaoh paused. A Hebrew recently spoke that same name to me, the Pharaoh finished. He left the conversation open, hoping I would explain who Adam was. I was amazed at how little mortals knew of their origins. They could count back their lineage for 1,000 years, but failed to understand how they were created. Adam is the father of all men. He, the very first man, was created by Allah from the darkest clay in the deepest parts of the earth. Then Allah gave Adam his breath, and thus life, I replied. This story seemed to resonate with the Pharaoh, as if it touched him in some way. He was about to reply, but was interrupted by an approaching man in an expensive blue silk robes. This man was not a god, yet he commanded the respect of the gods and the Pharaoh. The man looked at me as he approached. The Pharaoh nodded at him. My lord, that man has returned, and he's demanding we free his people, the man said. He bowed so deep, his chin nearly touched the floor. The Pharaoh frowned and stood. Attend me! The Pharaoh paused. What is your name? The Pharaoh asked. I am Angrid, I replied. The Pharaoh smiled. Attend me, Angrid, the Hebrew that has called out your god's name, is back, the Pharaoh said. He did not look frustrated at all. He seemed just as intrigued by this Hebrew as he was by me. I stood and followed the Pharaoh out of the gardens and into the palace throne room. Everything here was laden in gold and precious stones. The throne room was huge. Warriors guarded this room in the hundreds. They were stationed everywhere. Priests and nobles waited below the throne. The throne itself looked like a huge golden sun with cushy purple silk cushions on it. Nobles and dignitaries from all over overcrowded the room. The Pharaoh stared at a huge ebony-skinned Hebrew who stood in the center. Everyone gave him a wide berth. He has an aura of power and authority about him. His eyes burned with a fire brighter than any I have yet seen. His hair was thick and black, like sheep's wool. It looked much like Adam's hair. His beard was the same. He was tall and muscular. He was a giant of a man. I knew at once this man was a prophet. He had to be Musa, the one the Hebrews spoke about. Thank you for seeing me, brother, the man boomed. His voice was deep and commanding. The entire room hushed when he spoke. I was taken aback by him calling the Pharaoh brother. You forsake my love and that title, Musa, when you chose the Hebrew slaves over me, the Pharaoh responded. I could tell the Pharaoh loved Musa. I could see it in his eyes and hear it in his voice. He missed his brother and his only true friend. Was the Pharaoh loved by Allah? Was that why Pharaoh also suffered? We all have a role to play in what plan God has for us. The view of good and evil almost seemed meaningless once you understand that everything was part of a plan that was forced upon us, that we all were pawns or actors in a game or scheme that we had no choice but to play.
Always meddling, Andreed,
I heard the voice of Iblis. My heart stopped and I could not hear what words Musa and the Pharaoh exchanged. I looked around for Iblis and could not see him.
You still know nothing,
Iblis said. I turned to the voice and saw him standing next to the Pharaoh, whispering to him. I knew only I and maybe Musa could see him. I knew Iblis would not attack me here, but to see him again shook me to my core. I turned back to see one of the Pharaoh's priests summoned a snake out of thin air. The snake was albino. It was huge and hissed at Musa. Musa shook his head. His eyes glowed with the fires of heaven. It was blinding. Could no one else see it?
These tricks are of Iblis that whispers in your ear, brother. I ask, for your sake, let my people go.
Musa boomed. Iblis stopped whispering and looked intently at Musa. He was as shocked as I was that Musa could see him.
You know of me, mortal?
Iblis demanded. No one heard Iblis but Musa and me.
Indeed, you are the arrogant Jinn that refused to bow to that which was better than you, the foolish Jinn that did not know his place,
Musa replied. The Pharaoh and those watching were trying to figure out who Musa was talking to. Musa was fearless. He did not fear Iblis, and Iblis knew he was powerless to harm Musa. Iblis growled and went back to whispering to the Pharaoh.
If your Yahweh is greater than Ra, have him kill this serpent,
Pharaoh demanded. Musa sighed. I could see his huge chest expand.
Brother, if you do not let my people go, Yahweh will curse you and this entire city until you do. Please, brother, just let them go,
Musa boomed.
See, his God has no power. He's afraid of that snake,
Iblis whispered to the Pharaoh. Iblis waved his hand at the snake, and it got bigger. Its fangs dripped with poison. It was as big as a man now. It seemed like it was preparing to devour Musa. Musa sighed deeply and placed his staff on the floor. The staff was old and black. It slithered on the floor and turned into a huge black snake bigger than the albino one of Iblis. The black snake lunged with a speed that only an immortal could fathom and bit the albino serpent. Like a balloon deflating, the albino snake shrank and was consumed by the black one. Iblis howled in rage. The people in the room were deathly silent. They were afraid. The black snake shrunk and became the old withered black staff of Musa's once again. The priest hissed at Musa in fear.
There is no God but God, brother, and God wants you to free his people,
Musa said as he slowly knelt to pick up the staff. He locked eyes with me. The fire in them was so bright it burned me. I visibly flinched and fell back. A bright smile showing rows of beautiful white teeth cracked his ebony bearded face.
I know of you, Andreed,
he said, then turned back to his brother. The Pharaoh stood and glared at his adopted brother.
How did you do that? When did you become a magician, Musa?
Pharaoh stammered. Musa shook his huge head. There was pity in his eyes for the brother he loved. I could see that Musa was pained by this, that he did not want to cause trouble for his brother. As always, the words of Nuh and the other prophets rang true. To be loved by God is to suffer. Truly, none suffers worse than the prophets. You still don't understand, brother. I have no power. It is not I who does these things. It is the will of Allah, Yahweh, or whatever name men call him by. I am but his slave, and I do as he commands, Musa said. Musa seemed tired and exhausted. He leaned heavily on the staff. Being the conduit for all of that power must be taxing on him.
You see, he lies. If it was not him who did this, he would not be so weak and worn from the magic,
Iblis whispered in the Pharaoh's ear. Musa glared at Iblis, and for the first time I saw Iblis flinch. Iblis was just as afraid of the fire in Musa's dark eyes as I was. It blinded him as much as it blinded me. The people in the throne room were silent. Many had left or stood as far away from Musa as they could. Beloved brother, I am commanded to tell you that every day a new plague will visit you, each one worse than the next. These plagues will touch your entire kingdom, save for the Hebrews. The curse of Yahweh is upon you, Musa boomed. He turned his back to his brother and left the throne room. For several minutes after he left, his presence was still felt. No one dared to talk. Then, like a wave that was held back from crashing upon the shore, all broke their silence at once. The people and nobles were scared. They saw his staff turn into a snake and destroy the snake of Ra. They heard the plagues will come. They felt the power of Musa's words and presence. The Pharaoh stood and motioned for all to be silent. They obeyed. It seemed they feared the wrath of the Pharaoh than they did the warnings of Musa. Or maybe the wrath of Pharaoh was imminent and tangible. They had not decided on how to take Musa. Either way, the room fell silent.
My advice to you, great lord, is to free the Hebrews and be done with Prince Musa and this whole ordeal.
One of the nobles dared to speak. Many chimed in their agreement. The Pharaoh sat back down on his golden throne and sighed. He was silent a long moment. His brow furrowed as he thought. He looked at his priests and waved to them. His priests smiled eagerly. They walked in the middle of the people and waved their hands. The torches went out and balls of fire hovered above their palms. I could see Iblis smiling as he followed Pharaoh from the room. The people oohed and ahed at the power displayed before them.
This is the power of Ra,
they shouted. Their task was to ease the fears of the people and reaffirm their faith in their God. I took this opportunity to leave. I wanted to find this Musa. I wanted to talk to him. I just wanted to be near him. I wondered how he knew of me. I ran back to the slums and found Safura. She smiled when she saw me. Where is he? Did he come here? I asked. Even though I did not say who, Safura knew who I was speaking about. She said nothing and motioned to a mountain off in the distance.
He awaits you there," she said. She turned and hurried off. She and her people seemed to be packing and preparing to leave. Had Pharaoh freed them? Or were they that confident in Musa? I turned to that mountain and ran as fast as I could to it. I don't remember ever running this hard or wanting to talk to someone so bad. It was not that I really wanted to talk to him, I just wanted to be near him. He was like no other prophet that I had ever seen. He was powerful. It seemed he could crush the mountain I ran to with just his presence. He was a light that shined brighter than any other I had encountered. In a matter of moments, Egypt was behind me, and I stood at the base of the mountain. I looked around, and I could not see him. I started to panic. Was I too late? I thought. But then I caught the sight of smoke nearby. I ran to it. There, by a small fire, sat the great ebony Hebrew Musa. He had erected a small shelter. It was essentially some worn and torn blanket draped over some rocks to protect him from the elements. He was cooking his evening meal. He looked tired. He did not seem nearly as powerful as he had earlier. He looked at me, his dark eyes still smouldering with fire. He smiled. As big and imposing as he was, his smile was warm and disarming. "Read," Musa said. His voice boomed, but not with the same authority. He was exhausted. He stood and embraced me. His embracing was like a waterfall in the fact that it was both beautiful and crushing. He kissed me on my cheek. "Welcome, Read. Please, share my fire," Musa said. I could not help but smile at him. He smelled horrible, but he was full of love and warmth. He seemed a gentle giant that would weep if he accidentally stepped on an insect, but would destroy the world at his Lord's command. I sat and felt the warmth of his fire touch my pale flesh. We did not talk for long hours. We just sat there and enjoyed the peace and presence of each other. Then, out of nowhere, Musa's huge shoulders heaved as he sighed. "Tomorrow, Read, the plagues will start. Many people will die and be hurt. But the will of Allah must be done," Musa said. I was always amazed at how all the prophets were among the poorest of people. Even Ayub, who was wealthy beyond most kings, found a closeness to God and a sense of peace when he was stripped of his wealth and suffered. Most were dirty and dishevelled men, but great men that could have been kings of great nations, but instead they were homeless slaves of God. Musa was no different. It would not take much for him to overthrow his brother and become Pharaoh. He could live the rest of his days a loved prince of Egypt, live a life of luxury and ease. Yet here he was, seeking shelter under some dirty torn rags, and smelled of dirt and shit. "What are these plagues?" I asked. Musa sighed again. I truly don't know. Allah will tell me when it is time what to do, and I will do it. I do know each one will be worse than the next. They will affect the entirety of Egypt," Musa replied. He was scared. I was baffled by this. He would be the tool in which the plagues would come to beautiful Egypt. But he, the Prophet Musa, was scared. "Why are you frightened?" I asked. Musa locked eyes with me, the fire of heaven that burned in them, holding and burning me. "Only a fool would not fear the wrath of Allah," Musa replied. He blinked and released me from his hold. I shuddered. "There will be a day, Angrid, when all the world will be flat, and God will raise every soul and call them to account. There will only be one man, one prophet of God whose place in heaven is certain. That man is not me. Even I, a chosen slave of Allah, am not certain that I am worthy of paradise," Musa said. I was confused by this. How could he not be worthy? Was Nu, Ishmael, Lut, the humble Ayub? "Has this man already lived?" I asked Musa. Musa smiled at me, the look of fear and exhaustion fading for a moment. I had noticed that Musa stuttered often when he talked, that it was hard for him to speak properly. He would get frustrated at times. But when he was fulfilling his task from God, his stutter would vanish. "He has not. I was given a vision of him. Maybe one day, Angrid, you will meet him. He is a brown-skinned Arab. His face shines like the sun. Trees bend to shade him. His heart is stronger than even mine, and more pure. He will be an orphan that cannot read or write. Yet he was chosen to be the best of us all, and the last mercy for men," Musa said. He stuttered slightly as he spoke, but I could see the love in his face for this yet unborn prophet, this illiterate orphan from Arabia, this man whose place is assured in the gardens of heaven. I did want to meet this man, for I was curious. He seemed beautiful. I could imagine a brown man from Arabia with a face as bright as the sun. I could see him sitting as palm trees bent to shade him. I wondered what his powers would be. I was curious why Allah chose the men that he did. Nu was a drunk, Lut a man of desire, Ayub a man of wealth. It was not until after Musa passed that I discovered that he was a murderer with a temper. Allah seemed to always choose men with glaring faults. Was that to show that nothing is beyond his mercy, that any and all are loved by him? Did God really choose these men, or were they predestined? I had so many questions, as if Musa read my very thoughts. "I cannot answer your questions, Angrid. Some things were never meant for us to know, and others are just simply beyond me. I have one task in this life, and my knowledge is thankfully limited to that," Musa said. I sighed disappointedly. Maybe this man from Arabia would know the answers. He would be the last prophet. I wondered how long mankind would last without one. Every time a prophet came, he reset a world that was tipping into chaos. He was like a father picking up a child who was crawling into something that could hurt him. I feared without that direction, mankind would soon fail. I wanted to ask Musa more questions, but I turned to him and found him fast asleep. He snored so loudly I was afraid it would attract people. I must have been deeply lost in my thoughts to have not noticed it before. I was nervous about what tomorrow would bring. Sleep did not come to me. I sat by Musa's fire and tended it so he would not get cold. I knew he was exhausted. All the prophets I have met have always been exhausted. It was a heavy, painful burden to be loved so by God. If these next few days were going to be eventful, then he needed his rest. I was so lost in my thoughts and staring at the fire that I did not see the sun start to rise or notice the passing of the night. I watched as Musa rose and smiled at me. He took water from his water skin and washed his face and hands, then faced the rising sun and prostrated. He placed his forehead on the cool sand and prayed. He prayed for what seemed like hours. Then, as suddenly as he had woken, he stood and grabbed his staff. "It is time for the first plague, Angrid," Musa said. I nodded at him and had to jog to keep up with his long strides. He was as tall as I was, but much stockier. I was 7 feet tall. I towered above all other humans I have met. I have always had to look down on them. But with Musa, we were eye to eye. It was strange to be equal in height to a mortal. I followed him silently for many miles. We stopped when we reached the Nile River. It was beautiful to look upon. It was a great divider between the wealthy and the poor. On one side of the Nile was the Egyptian royalty, rich merchants and nobles. The other side was the slums and ghettos, where the slaves and poor lived. We were on the side of the poor. Musa breathed hard and stood in the shallow waters and watched downriver. I was going to ask what he was waiting for, but it was not long until a royal procession was seen coming down the river. The pharaoh enjoyed taking his boat out in the morning. He would sit in luxury and would be fed grapes as he passed by the poor and hungry who have not eaten in days. It was a cruel gesture of his authority and power. I could see the eyes of the hungry stare at the food he ate. Musa waded deeper into the river. He was up to his waist now. It was clear the pharaoh had seen him. The royal guard had their bows trained on Musa. "Taking a swim, brother?" the pharaoh asked mockingly. Musa smiled. The jest and jabs at him did not bother him one bit. "I come to ask you if you will let my people go," Musa's voice boomed. There was no hint of his stutter. I could see the pharaoh sigh in frustration. He sipped water from a golden cup. "No, Musa, I will not. I need a new palace built, and who better to do it than the filthy black Hebrews?" Pharaoh said. Musa sighed deeply. He was not angry. He was disappointed. I could see it in his eyes. "Then I must set the first plague upon you. Every day I will ask you to let my people go, and every day you refuse, a worse plague will befall Egypt," Musa said sadly. The pharaoh laughed. Musa raised his staff and slammed it hard into the water. A red ball started to form in the water where his staff struck it. Musa waded to the shore and watched as that red ball engulfed the entirety of the Nile River. I was curious as to what the water had turned to. I dipped my fingers in it and put it to my tongue. Immediately I gagged. It was blood. The entire Nile River had turned to blood. "What foul trick is this, Musa?" the pharaoh demanded. He took a drink from his golden cup and spit out blood.
"Blood? You have turned the river to blood?" the Pharaoh demanded.
All could hear the rising fear in his voice.
"There will be no water in all of Egypt until you let my people go. You have spilled their blood without cause, and now you and all the people of Egypt shall drink it."
Musa boomed. His voice could be heard throughout the entire city. Screams of horror could be heard everywhere as their water was now blood.
"You start to anger me, brother,"
Pharaoh said. He motioned for his guards. They knocked their bows and shot at Musa. I was going to retreat, but saw that Musa was not, so I stood behind him. The arrows all fell at his feet.
"This is the blood of my people, the blood of the Hebrews. You have spilled so much of it that it would fill all the waters of this world," Musa said.
Musa glared at the Pharaoh one last time and left. I could hear the Pharaoh cursing at Musa as we walked briskly away. We returned to a small, modest camp. Musa looked exhausted. We had just woken up not long ago, and he looked like he had been working in the mines all day.
"Are all the waters in Egypt blood?"
I asked. Musa sat with his huge ebony back against a rock. He stared down at his hands for a long moment.
"Yes,"
he replied. I wondered what people would drink. Many would get sick and die from just this first plague. If this was the lightest of the plagues, I dreaded what was to come next.
"What of the innocent people?"
I asked. Musa sighed.
"From him we come, and to him we shall return. I do not question Andrid. I do as Allah bids me,"
Musa replied. He closed his eyes, and I could hear his loud snoring. He was fast asleep. I thought hard upon Musa's words as I stood and walked to the city. Maybe my questioning was why I am here, is why I am in the darkness of this world instead of in the light of paradise. Musa and the other prophets followed and obeyed. It did not matter what they thought about it or felt, they just did as Allah bid them. They have never seen or smelled paradise, yet they strive for it so hard, where we, jinns, had taken it for granted. I entered the outskirts of the city and saw the people in panic. Most would not get sick this day, but several days without water, they would begin to die. The people were confused and shocked. Others blamed the Hebrews. They beat them and burned down their slums and hovels. The Hebrews just took it with a grim smile on their face. They had water. Every cup they touched was water, but as soon as anyone other touched the cup, it was back to blood. Their day of revenge and reckoning had come. They knew it would get worse for their oppressors. The Pharaoh sent his guard to protect the Hebrews from further abuse. He did not do it because he cared. He knew Musa cared for them, and his city was being cursed because of them. He wanted to keep them safe as a bargaining chip. Blood filled the streets, and people screamed and wailed. They called upon Ra and their other gods to save them, but nothing could. I wandered the city all day and watched the people suffer. When I could take no more, I made my way back to where Musa slept. I could hear him snoring from a mile off. I tended the dying fire and sat staring at it.
I did not notice the blood on my hands and robes. I looked down at the old dirty sandals I wore, and they were covered in blood. Was it truly the blood of his people, the blood of these ebony-skinned Hebrews? Musa woke as he did the day earlier and prayed. He walked into the city that seemed covered in blood. People stared at him in awe. They hushed as he walked by. They followed him as he made his way to the palace. The guards barred his entrance. Musa did not mind. He stood facing the palace. He knew Pharaoh was watching him.
"Let my people go, Pharaoh, or more plagues will come,"
Musa's voice boomed. It could be heard all over the city. The people of the city stood in silence, waiting for whatever was going to happen next.
"No!"
A defiant, angry shout came from within the palace. Musa sighed deeply. He raised his staff in the air, and it shone brightly.
"The next curse of Allah is upon you," Musa said.
He turned and walked through the crowd and back to his camp. As we walked, we heard screams of horror and disgust. Millions upon millions of huge green frogs fell upon the city. I could hear them croak loudly as we left. This is how it went every day. Egypt suffered a new plague. Every day Musa would ask Pharaoh to let his people go. Pharaoh would refuse. I'm not sure if it was out of stubbornness or hate. The Pharaoh would not budge. The Pharaoh was powerless against Musa and the plagues. His great and mighty army useless. The people suffered lice, they itched and scratched all over. Locusts came and harassed them and destroyed their crops. Their livestock dies and pestilence plagued them. It hailed non-stop. All of these plagues were on top of the other plagues. Many of the people of Egypt had died. Yet still the Pharaoh refused. 8 days into the plagues, I walked back into the ravaged and miserable city. Flies in countless numbers harassed the people along with the frogs and locusts. Everyone was in pain, for boils had come upon their flesh. The suffering was almost too much for me to bear. Musa stood in front of the palace once more. The people were too weak to follow. The guards barely stood. The Pharaoh looked tired and haggard. Boils blistered on his face.
"Look what you have done to this once beautiful city, Musa. To the people that loved you as their prince. Look at them,"
the Pharaoh shouted weakly. Musa looked haggard and tired. I could tell it pained him to see this city and its people like this. We could hear the prayers and chants of the Hebrews who were untouched by all of this. Many of them cursed and spit on the suffering people that had oppressed and beat them their entire lives. Musa shook his head in disappointment at this, but said nothing.
"It is you, brother, in your pride and arrogance that causes this. Simply let my people go, and all this will go away. If not, the plagues that follow will make the others seem pale."
Musa boomed. He paused for a moment. His sad, tired face searched the eyes of the man he still loved as a brother.
"Will you let my people go?"
Musa asked. The Pharaoh did not answer. He simply shook his head.
"You can't keep this up forever. Eventually these plagues and you will go away,"
the Pharaoh replied weakly.
Musa lifted his staff in the air, and the sun seemed to disappear. The entire city was plunged into a thick, unnatural darkness. Torches could not pierce it. It was as if all in the city has gone blind. I could hear the people scream in terror as they could no longer see. I could hear the foul curses of the Pharaoh as he berated Musa. Musa seemed to not hear of any of this. He walked over to the Hebrews and smiled sadly down at his betrothed Sapphira. "Slaughter several lambs and use its blood to draw a thick line on the top of your doors. Afterwards, stay in your home and don't leave until I call you," Musa said. I could see the fear in the Hebrews' eyes as Musa told them this. They knew something dreadful was coming. They knew the final plague would be here. Musa turned to the beleaguered city and shouted the same instructions to all that would hear. I followed him back to his camp. He sat and stared at the fire. He looked even more exhausted than usual. His heart was just as exhausted as his body. "This next plague, Angrid, is truly dreadful. One that I love will be a victim of it," Musa said. He placed his dirty face in his dirty, huge hands and wept. He wept with all of his heart and soul. His huge shoulder heaved and shuddered. It hurt me deeply to see this great man sob like this. To see him in such pain. What God asked of him hurt and scared him deeply, yet he did not question. He just obeyed. Musa wept until he fell asleep. He needed to weep as he did. It was soul-cleansing for mortals to weep so. The soul could only take so much. It could only be filled with so much filth from this earth before it had to clean itself. Musa woke with the rising of the sun. It seemed only we and the Hebrews could see it. Everyone else was lost in thick darkness. I heard the screams and cries all through the night of the suffering people of Egypt. I wanted to cleanse myself as Musa did. I wanted to place my face in my hands and weep as he did. But for some reason I could not. Maybe my cup of pain was not yet filled. We made our way back into the city and stood in front of the palace. The people and Pharaoh could see Musa. He was a bright, shining light that pushed back the darkness. All flocked to him for warmth and to share his light. "Brother!" Musa boomed. I could see the Pharaoh stumbling in his garden. He looked ashen. His brown skin was pocked with boils and blood. The frogs and other plagues surrounded him. His lips were parched, for he had not drunk since this had begun. "Have you come to kill me, brother?" the Pharaoh responded. Musa sighed deeply. "No, beloved brother. I come to beg you, please, let my people go." The pain in Musa's booming voice was heard by all. The Pharaoh laughed. "You beg me, brother. Your power and plagues are finally coming to an end," the Pharaoh mocked. "I will not let the cursed Hebrews go," the Pharaoh croaked. "Brother, I beg you to reconsider. This final plague is truly horrible," Musa begged. The Pharaoh laughed at Musa's pain. "I have endured all that the cursed Yahweh has sent. I can endure this last one. After it, brother,
When Yahweh has abandoned you for failing him, I will kill you. I'll mount your head in front of my palace. I hate you, Musa, the Pharaoh spat. His word visibly stung Musa. It was like a knife cutting into his huge heart. Slowly, Musa nodded. There was no turning back now. Musa raised his staff, and the darkness and all the other plagues vanished. The boils left the people alone with the frogs and blood. The people sighed in relief and shouted thanks to Ra. Allah demands the firstborn sons of the people of Egypt, Musa said. He hung his head and slowly walked out of the city. His words stung the people. Others wailed in horror. They grabbed their sons and ran from the city. They did not care for their belongings. They just ran. But sadly, there is no place they could run or hide from the wrath of God. I could not find the words to speak what was on my heart. Even if I could, I would not do so to Musa. This burden was crushing him. By the time we got back to the camp, he was crawling on the floor. He lay on his back and screamed loudly. His scream was dark and full of pain. I sat next to Musa and placed my face in my huge pale hands and screamed with him. I followed Musa into the city. The sounds of sobbing and wailing parents could be heard all over. They all brought their dead firstborn sons to the gates of the Pharaoh's palace and sobbed. They begged the Pharaoh to help them and raise their sons from the dead. How truly lost they were. Pharaoh sat in his garden, holding his firstborn son. He was cradling his head like he was a baby, despite his son being almost full grown. The Pharaoh sobbed. He glared at Musa, defeated, as Musa approached the gates. I never thought you would kill your own nephew, the Pharaoh gasped in between sobs. He loved you, Musa. He used to fall asleep on your chest as you told him stories. How could you do this? The Pharaoh shouted angrily. Musa flinched at each word. It was like an arrow piercing him over and over again. He just stood and took it. He wanted to weep and cry out, but he got all of that out of him last night. Musa stared at his dead nephew a moment. I have come to take my people and go, Musa said. The Pharaoh kissed his son's head and waved his consent to Musa, defeated. The Pharaoh had no more strength to defy him or his God anymore. I could tell Musa wanted to comfort his brother, that he wanted to apologize, but he kept his mouth shut. He turned and walked to the slums. We passed the people of Egypt who were sobbing and wrapping their firstborn sons in sheets to be buried. It was a horrid sight. This once bright and amazing city seemed dark and like a tomb. The Hebrews were ready. They had a grim look of victory on their faces. They hugged their firstborn sons tightly to them. They did not have much. Whatever they had, they carried on their backs or in their arms. There were nearly 1,000 of them. When they saw Musa, they did not cheer or applaud. They just nodded and smiled. Even though this was the day of their freedom, it was marked with tragedy and loss. Despite their defiant looks,
They felt for their oppressors on a human level. It was hard for them to do even that, for they knew the sons they had lost would have grown to oppress their sons. It was hard for them to show any sympathy. I could see the struggle in their eyes as they followed Musa and passed by the thousands of mourning Egyptians. We marched for days behind Musa. No one knew where we were going. We just knew to follow the prophet. The Hebrews sang songs praising God as they walked. They danced around campfires. They washed the dirt and shit from their bodies and clothes. For the first time, I saw how beautiful these ebony-skinned people truly were. Their dark flesh shone in the desert moonlight. They would hold their children and sing to them. They baked bread and passed it out among them. They loved each other and cared for the well-being of their fellow Hebrew in the way that I will never see again in a people. After a week of walking through the desert, we came to the Red Sea. It was called that because of the reddish look of the water. It looked like a sea of blood. Over the years, that deep red would fade, but the name would stay. We made camp at the shore, and the Hebrews sang and danced again, enjoying their freedom. I watched them smiling. It was nice to see people happy after all of the pain of the past weeks. My thoughts were interrupted by a stocky, well-built Hebrew man running up to Musa.
"Prophet,"
the man said, exhausted. Musa looked at him and waited patiently for the man to catch his breath.
"The Pharaoh comes with his army,"
the Hebrew said. I sighed. There would be more Hebrew blood. We could not defend against the Pharaoh's army. I resigned myself to fight for them. I could not die, nor truly be injured by any mortal.
"Break camp and gather the people at the shore," Musa told the Hebrew.
He nodded and ran off shouting to his brethren. I did not speak or ask the question that was burning on my tongue. I just watched to see what Musa would do. He fell to his knees and leaned forward and placed his forehead on the sand. He prayed. I could feel the fire of heaven surround him. Something great was going to happen. Something that I will always remember. The Hebrews were worried. They spoke in hushed, scared voices. But they watched Musa and waited. After what seemed like an hour, Musa stood and grabbed his staff. He walked to the edge where the ocean waters kissed the shore. He raised his black staff high in the air. The ground began to shake and tremble. A deep, dark crack formed at Musa's feet. It was no different than a rock hitting glass and cracks starting from the impact point spread across the glass. The crack spread across the ocean surface. As it did, the ocean was pushed back on each side by what seemed like invisible hands. But I knew better, for I could see the angels in numbers that I could not begin to fathom, holding the ocean back on each side. In a matter of moments, we could see muddy earth where the ocean once was. The ground was littered with sharp rocks and other formations I had no name for. The Hebrews stood in awe of this. To think I was once chained to the bottom of an ocean. It was not this ocean, for this was not nearly as deep and fathomless.
"Make your way across and be careful," Musa boomed.
He led the way and gingerly walked around the sharp rocks and formations on the ocean floor. I followed behind him. My feet were being stabbed by the rocks, but I did not care. I watched the angels hold the ocean walls at bay. The walls of water were thousands of feet high on either end. The angels did not smile or wave at me. They did not look kindly at me. They just stared. Many of the Hebrews were bleeding and hurt as we walked on. It would take us days to cross this vast ocean. We would stop and make camp, but none could sleep. Who could sleep between two massive walls of ocean? As each hour dragged on, Musa looked more exhausted than the next. He was the only one that found rest. I don't think he had a choice in the matter. By the end of the third day of walking the ocean floor, Pharaoh's army could be heard entering the pass made for the Hebrews. Their horses and chariots failed and broke on the sharp rocks. They had to abandon them at the shore and walk. I wondered what went through their minds when they saw the very ocean parted for the Hebrews. What fear and awe they must have felt. I had to admire the courage of his soldiers and the authority he had over them to make them follow the Hebrews through the parted seas. They, being soldiers, they marched at a much faster pace than the Hebrew people. The Hebrews looked at Musa worried. Musa pointed in the distance at the shore on the other end. A cheer went up among the Hebrews. They did not want to camp that night. They pushed on through the night. The strength and courage of the Hebrews yet again amazed me. At midday the next day, Musa stepped on the shore. He walked up to a hill and overlooked his people climbing out of the parted seas. It looked like a ramp had been hastily made to allow the Hebrews to walk uphill from the depths of the sea. They struggled to walk up to it, but they did. Pharaoh's army had closed the distance greatly. They could be seen maybe an hour behind them. The last Hebrew climbed out of the ocean depths and onto the shore. They lay on the cool sand, exhausted and relieved. Musa stared at the approaching army of the Pharaoh. He watched them as they approached, led by his angry and grieving brother. When they came to the foot of the ramp, Musa shouted down at them, "Turn back, brother, and live!" Musa boomed. The soldiers of the Pharaoh's army looked nervously at the walls of water, whose waves seemed to crash angrily at the angels that held them up. Many abandoned their positions in formation and ran as fast as they could back the way they came. Sadly, they would never make it back in time.
"You and your cursed god took my reason to live," the Pharaoh spat.
There was a madness in his voice and eyes that was brought by pain and loss. Musa wept openly. The tears that fell from his ebony eyes sparkled like pearls as they fell down his bearded face.
"I am sorry for what you have suffered. No, there is forgiveness even now, if you but ask for it," Musa said.
His voice was pleading with his brother. There was no saving his brother's life at this point. But maybe he could save his soul.
"Fuck you, Musa, and your god,"
the Pharaoh cursed. The Pharaoh looked at his men.
"Up the hill and kill them all,"
the Pharaoh ordered. His soldiers roared in response and started to run up the hill. They stopped suddenly as the ground started to shake violently. The water started crashing together behind them. I watched as the angels left their post, holding the ocean apart and ascending back to paradise. Pharaoh knew he was going to die. I think he knew the moment he followed Musa and the Hebrews. He locked eyes with Musa. He did not try to run and escape the water. His men screamed in horror and tried to scramble up the hill, but the trembling ground kept them from being able to stand for very long.
"Brother,"
the Pharaoh whispered, as the ocean waters crushed him. The Pharaoh did not feel any pain. The force of the ocean crushed him and killed him instantly. I stared at his crumbled and broken form through the ocean depths. He lay in the darkness, his heart broken way before his body ever was. He was not alone. There was a bright light standing next to him. It was an angel. It had to be Gabriel. No other angel shone so brightly. I looked closer. Gabriel was shoving dirt in the dead Pharaoh's mouth. It took me many years to understand this, to understand why the beloved Gabriel would bother to shove dirt in a dead mortal's mouth. But after years of thinking about it, I finally understood that Gabriel feared that God, in his great love and mercy for those who he gave his breath, he would forgive the Pharaoh. He put dirt in his mouth because he feared Pharaoh would ask for forgiveness with his dying breath. But beautiful Gabriel did not understand that dead mortals cannot speak. Gabriel was the nearest angel to God and knew God would forgive even someone as undeserving of mercy as Pharaoh. Musa still stood on the hill. He stared at where his brother once was.
"Brother,"
Musa said. The Hebrews did not stray far from the shore. They cut down trees and made small homes just below the hill that Musa stood and stared at his brother as the ocean crushed him. I noticed Musa was very distant and forlorn. He did not interact with the Hebrews very much. He ate very little. He spent most of his time on the hill in prayer. His heart hurt, and he was fighting a battle internally. All of the events of the past month started to weigh on him. The suffering and deaths of so many was a burden on his shoulders that he did not want to bear. I did not want to bother Musa, so I gave him his space. But I watched him closely. He wept throughout the night. He wept for his brother, the Pharaoh. I knew he would never be able to forget staring into his brother's eyes as the ocean crushed him. He wept for his nephew. I wondered if the image of his brother holding his nephew's body in his arms while he wept plagued Musa. Musa married the beautiful Safura, and she tended to him. She was patient and caring. She knew her husband carried the weight of his people on his shoulders, that he had directly communicated with God. I wish I would have been there to see that tree catch fire and hear the beloved voice of Allah. I envied the prophets sometimes, and other times I did not. I envied their connection with God, but I did not envy their suffering. I wondered if talking with God balanced out the suffering for them. As the days passed, the Hebrews made this new world of theirs a paradise. Marriages happened and children were born. They planted crops and life was going well for them. But Musa needed time to think. He had done all he could for them. He felt a calling, a tug at his soul to ascend to the top of a nearby mountain and pray. He announced to the people that he would be gone for several days. He needed to pray and be closer to God. He needed guidance on what to do next. The Hebrews wept at the thought of Musa leaving them. Even though he reassured them that he would return, they still wept. They walked with him to the edge of the city. Many stopped to kiss his hands or his feet. They loved Musa. I could tell Musa loved them and felt responsible for them. At the edge of their small makeshift city, Musa kissed his wife Safura on her beautiful ebony forehead. She wept the hardest. She hugged him tightly. "Please return safely, husband," Safura said gently. She kissed his hands tenderly and watched as he left. I did not follow Musa. I knew he wanted to be alone. He had some things to work out. Some demons his heart was battling his soul with. He needed a moment of peace and rest. He deserved it. I sat on Musa's hill and watched the Hebrews. "I'll protect your people, great prophet, until you return," I vowed. The days slowly passed. There had been no word or sign of Musa. The city seemed to adjust and continue on. I started to notice jinns among the people. They whispered to them. Sometimes at night I swore I heard the dark laughter of Iblis. I longed for Musa to return. The jinn wanted no parts of Musa. They fled from him. They feared him. No one missed Musa more than Safura. Every day she would bake fresh bread and wait by the road for hours with a cup of clean water for her husband. Every day she would weep and return home disappointed. My heart ached for her, for her burden was also a big one. She was the wife of a prophet. Though she would never bear his burden, just being so close to him she could be crushed by it. It did not take long for something to happen. The jinns had flocked here once word that Musa had left his people got around them. I noticed a big bonfire in the center of their small city. All were bringing their gold to be melted. I noticed Iblis in the center of the people. He was guiding the hands of a Hebrew that was known to be a blacksmith. He guided his hand for hours on end, and slowly a huge golden bull was formed from all the jewelry the Hebrews brought with them from Egypt. I did not know what this bull was. But if Iblis was here, it certainly was something that did not bode well for the Hebrews. I did not want to challenge Iblis. I knew he was far stronger than I. But I had vowed to protect Musa's people until he returned. I stood on the hill and looked hard at Iblis. He turned to me and smiled. Before I could blink, he had covered the distance of nearly a mile and was standing in front of me.
"Angrid, how did I know that I would find you here, grovelling to be in the presence of the prophets?"
Iblis mocked. I did not want to exchange words or waste time. I struck him as hard as I could. I hit him square in his chest. He flew back several feet and landed hard against a tree. All the other jinns stopped whispering and stared at me. Iblis crumbled to the floor. I thought I had won. I thought I had defeated the great and once beautiful Iblis, until I heard his dark laughter.
"You have grown stronger, Angrid,"
Iblis mocked as he stood. Before I could react, Iblis was on me. His hands were like claws. He ripped me to shreds.
I howled in pain. Every wound Iblis would make on me would quickly heal. As much damage as he would do to me, it was for nothing. Iblis roared in frustration. He could not harm me, nor could I harm him. Eventually, this fact set into Iblis's dark mind. He stopped attacking me and stood before me.
"Stay out of my way, Andreed. I may not be able to harm you, but I can harm every soul in this foul city,"
Iblis growled. My heart raced. I knew Iblis was foul enough to murder innocents. He had done so before. Iblis laughed again. He knew he had me. He knew I was just as powerless to stop him as he was to me. The beings that could harm us were the guardians, the warrior angels like Malaik that bound me to the bottom of the ocean. Iblis's dark laughter haunted me as he went back to whispering to the people. I watched as they set up the huge golden bowl. They filled it with kindling and lit it on fire as the sun started to set. The golden bull's eyes glowed with fire inside of it.
"The god of Musa did not save us. The golden bull did. The gods of Egypt did."
A man, fully in the grasp of Iblis, bellowed. Hebrews beat drums and screamed. They stripped their clothes and danced naked around the bull. Many of the Hebrews resisted. They huddled in Musa's hut with Safura. The jinns stayed clear of her.
"All praise be the golden bull of Egypt,"
the old man bellowed.
"All praise the golden bull,"
hundreds of Hebrews replied. They prostrated before the bull. Iblis turned and stared at me as I watched this in disgust from the top of the hill.
"You see how weak and pathetic mortals are, Andreed,"
Iblis mocked.
"They witness Allah use Musa to plague Egypt and part the very sea so they could walk to freedom. Yet here they are bowing and scraping to a golden bull that they made."
Iblis laughed darkly. I hated Iblis more than ever, but I could not deny his reasoning. These Hebrews were indeed foolish. How could one witness such power, such miracles, then ignore them and worship something they built, something that cannot save them or itself? The Hebrews screamed wildly and danced erotically around the golden bull. Their ebony bodies reflected the moonlight and the light of the fire. They moaned and touched each other.
"Praise be the golden bull, the savior of the Hebrews,"
the man bellowed.
"Praise the bull, the savior of the Hebrews,"
the Hebrews replied. The Hebrews became intoxicated in their worship of this bull. With a prodding of the Jinn, the worship of the bull devolved into a massive orgy. I could not take it any longer. I had to find Musa. For only he could cast away these jinns. Only he could set this right. I ran from the Hebrew city, a city that was once a godly place. A place where the once oppressed found freedom. I was angry at them as I ran towards the mountain. They did not deserve Musa. They did not deserve this freedom. While they were oppressed, they clung to Allah or Yahweh or whatever name they called the Creator. He was their rope and their light in their dark tunnel, their compass in the wilderness. Now that they had freedom, they betrayed the love and mercy that was shown. They are not worthy of Allah's breath. Adam had failed and betrayed Allah. And now these Hebrews, these so-called
chosen people of God betray him with very little prodding. I was angry. For a moment I did not care if Iblis ripped them to shreds. They deserved it. How could they walk on the bottom of the ocean with 1,000,000 angels holding the ocean apart for them and still worship anything other than Allah?
I had reached the very top of the mountain in a matter of moments. So lost was I in my thoughts that I did not realize how much ground I had covered. It seemed I could see the entire world from here. I could see the shore on the other end of the Red Sea, the very place where Musa parted it. My eyesight was much better than any mortal's, so I could see things they could not. I looked down on the Hebrew hamlet. They still danced and fucked by the golden fiery bowl. "Musa!" I shouted. I could not see him anywhere. My voice echoed back to me. I ran the entire mountain searching for Musa. I stopped as I heard a loud grating sound. I recognized it. I followed it and found Musa fast asleep. He had made a small camp and slept soundly. He snored as loudly as ever. Beside him sat 2 heavy stone tablets. They had words in Hebrew etched in them. "Thou shalt not kill," I read from the tablet. I wanted to read more, but Musa stirred in his sleep. I hated to wake him. I knew this was probably the best sleep he had gotten in months. "Musa," I said softly as I shook him. Musa groaned and sat up. He rubbed his eyes and looked at me. "Undreed?" he asked. I could tell he was frustrated, but he still forced a smile on his huge ebony face. "Your people are in need of you," I said urgently. Musa stood and wiped the remaining sleep from his eyes. He grabbed his staff and pointed at the tablets. He wanted me to carry them. I nodded and gently picked them up. "This life is but a test," I heard Musa whisper softly to himself. I walked in silence with Musa down the mountain. I had so much to tell him, but I could feel the storm brewing in him. The closer we got, the angrier he seemed to get. I felt it was wise if I said nothing. "The Jinn waste no time," Musa growled as we neared the city. I could feel the Jinn's fear as word spread he had returned. Many were already fleeing. "Ungrateful!" Musa roared. His voice was so full of power and rage, every Hebrew stopped and cowered before him. All the Jinns but Iblis fled. "You are too late, mortal," Iblis mocked. Musa did not stop. He walked up to the laughing Iblis and struck him hard with his staff. Iblis flew hard against the golden bull, knocking it over. Iblis howled in pain and could not seem to move. "Foul one! Cursed one! Arrogant one! I should destroy this instant!" Musa roared in rage. For the first time I saw fear in the eyes of Iblis. He saw the nothingness of death in the fiery eyes of Musa. Iblis cowered before Musa. "I pity you, Jinn. If only you knew what stays my hand, you would beg me for death." Musa bellowed at Iblis. I was stunned at the power that emanated from Musa. Guardians descended and stood by him. Iblis did not move. He grovelled at Musa's foot. "Spare me, great prophet," Iblis begged. Musa glared at him. "It is not I who has the power to spare you. Like you, I am but a creation," Musa shouted. He grabbed Iblis by his pale arm.
and yanked him to his feet.
"Begone from here!"
Musa commanded. Iblis ran in fear. Never had I seen Iblis so afraid. His normal mocking smile vanished. Musa swung his staff and struck the golden bull that lay on its side. It shattered into 1,000,000 pieces.
"You fools!"
Musa shouted as he turned his rage on the Hebrews.
"You worship this thing you created that can't even save itself from me, yet alone Yahweh!"
Musa boomed. The Hebrews cowered before Musa's rage.
"Did Yahweh not punish those who oppressed you? Did he not part the sea so you could walk safely in the depths of it? Did he not feed you and bless you with this place of peace?"
Musa roared at them. I watched as Musa's massive chest heaved with rage. He kicked the golden head of the bull so hard that it shattered.
"You choose this?"
Musa started. Musa stopped to calm himself. He looked at the night sky for a long moment. He sighed deeply and turned to the Hebrews cowering naked on the floor.
"Yahweh removes his favor from you. You will be slaves again and oppressed again until Yahweh sees you worthy of his favor again. If he ever does," Musa said sadly. "This life is but a test,"
Musa whispered to himself again. It dawned on me that this was a reminder for himself. He kept reminding himself that he would be disappointed that this world, especially for a prophet, was meant to break his heart. I set the tablets down and watched as Musa left for his hut. I did not follow him. I knew he would take his wife and leave the ungrateful and now cursed Hebrews. The Hebrews begged Musa and clutched at the hems of his robes as he passed. Musa acted as if he did not see them. But I knew his heart was on fire. I knew he would weep for his people in the comfort of beautiful Safura's waiting arms. I did not see Musa again after that. I did not get to say goodbye. He deserved peace with his wife. I did not try to seek him out. I followed the Hebrews for a while. I still wanted to protect them. They made their way to West Africa. They shared the same skin tone as many of the African peoples. Their hair and features were noticeably different. Their lineage was a pock-mark on them wherever they went. People could tell they were a cursed people. The jinns followed them and their curse. To all people they encountered, they were treated harshly. As Musa stated, they were sold thousands of years later by Africans who did not want the blood of the cursed Hebrews mixed with them. They were sold to pale folks known as the Spanish and Europeans. They suffered greatly. Their suffering under the Europeans far superseded what they endured at the hands of the Pharaoh. Later, they were freed from slavery, only to still be oppressed and treated like cattle. The suffering of those that carry the cursed Hebrew blood continues to this very day. They, once the most beloved and chosen of God, are now the cursed people who will find no peace anywhere in this world. I hope one day Allah shows them favor again. So far in my long lifetime, I have yet to see it. I left the Hebrews in Africa way before they were enslaved by the Europeans, thousands of years before. The story of the Hebrews
has always been a cautionary tale. That is why I was surprised when I heard of another Hebrew in Arabia.